What's up guys, this is E-House from Gun Gamers, and as you can see, I have a lot of magazines on the table in front of me. I'm here at River City Airsoft filming on location. Thank you to them for allowing me to come out and film, and I'm also going to be borrowing some of the guns off their wall to do a compatibility test later in this video. I also purchased these magazines. Many of them are from River City, and then many others of them are from Amped Airsoft actually. The guys at Amped apparently liked the idea for the video, and they were kind enough to send me a bit of a discount on the magazines. So thank you very much to them for helping make this video happen. And then the rest just ordered from your standard shops or bought wherever I could find them. But all of these, with the exception of the old PTS E-Mag, all of these are brand new mags, never been fielded. The only thing I've done is I have loaded and unloaded them several times just for basic function check to make sure that they work. And obviously to give them a little bit of an opportunity to break in, but they haven't been lubricated in any way. None of them have been used in any major capacity other than, like I said, loading and unloading. Starting off fresh, all brand new magazines. I'm going to be using Elite Force 2.5s for the majority of this test until I go to a heavyweight BB feeding test, where then I'm going to be using ASG .4s. I'm going to be loading the mags with an Odin Innovation speed loader. All of these mags fit and work with the Odin Innovation, so there's a major question answered right there. And let's go over what magazines I have, and then we'll talk about the procedure for the testing. So these are in no particular order, these are just how I have them laid out. I'm gonna go right to left or whatever. I have Hex Mag, 120 round mid caps. I have G&P Skullfrog High RPS, 130 round mid caps. I have one of the old PTS 120 round E-Mags. I have an Ares Amoeba 140 round mid cap. I have a G&G GR16 120 round mid cap. A VFC QRS 120 round mid cap. I have an Airsoft Systems 85 round mid cap. I have an Elite Force 140 round mid cap. I have right here a G&P 130 round metal mid cap, you know, other Stanag types. I have a PTS EPM 150 round mid cap. I have a SOCOM Gear Troy 190 round mid cap. A MAG Metal 190 round mid cap. Then I have a MAG Plastic 130 round mid cap. I have a VFC 120 round Stanag mid cap. I have here a 6mm Pro Shop 140 round mid cap. I have a Tipman 120 round mid cap. I have here a SEMA or Matrix 150 round mid cap. I have a SEMA Lancer Tactical Matrix. These are sold under a whole bunch of different brand names, but it's the SEMA 190 round HK416 style Stanag. I have the SOCOM Gear Lancer 190 round mid cap. I have the Modify XTC 190 round mid cap. The Garter Blue Box 140 round mid cap. The KWA K120 120 round mid cap. An E&C 160 round mid cap. And an EVIC BAMF 190 round mid cap. So in total, there are 24 different mid-cap magazines on this table, and we're gonna test them all. So to start, the first test I'm gonna do actually is purely, number one, this will serve two purposes. This will be kind of an on-camera function check so that you can see that yes, these magazines seem to work properly outside of a gun. And number two, everyone seems to just accept whatever the capacity of a magazine is that's advertised. I want to put that to the test. So I have here a tube that I've marked with increments for every 10 rounds, and I'm going to see how many BBs these mags actually hold. In total, up to this top line is 100 rounds. So for however many of these as it takes, for however many fills it takes, I'm going to double check and count the real capacity that I get out of all of these magazines. These mags are all fully loaded using the Odin Innovation speed loader. I went until I couldn't turn the crank anymore without any serious resistance. I mean, basically to the point that I thought I would break the thing. So this is about as full as you should get them. Gonna start out with the Hex Mag. So with the Hex Mag, I was able to fully load this tube once to the top line, and then I loaded it again. It comes exactly the second line. So that's exactly 120 rounds. So the Hex Mag seems accurate with its stated capacity. Next up, we have the G&P 130 round. And then the G&P 130 round mid-cap that just fell over looks to come in with a count of about 128. I'm gonna call that within margin of error because I actually did drop a couple of BBs while I was filling this up. So we'll say the G&P 130 rounder is within margin of error. So that's about 130 rounds total. Next up, we have the old school PTS 120 round EMAG. And the PTS EMAG actually seems to come in at about 123 rounds from my count. So the PTS EMAG, again, within margin of error, in this case, over. I'm gonna give each of these mags like a 2 or 3 round margin of error just because of, you know, whether or not I used enough force loading it or whether I may have used too much force. Something I do occasionally. So 123 rounds for the EMAG. Next up, we have the Ares Amoeba MidCap. And the Ares Amoeba MidCap comes in at about 138 rounds. So again, I'm gonna call that within margin of error. Next up, we have the G&G 120 round MidCap. And we have for the G&G 120 rounder, actually 125 rounds. So again, kind of a margin of error. I might have put too much force into it. This isn't the most precise counting method, but again, seems accurate. If anything, favoring more. So next up, we have the VFC 120 round QRS MidCap. And we have from the VFC 120 round QRS mag, 120 rounds. So there we go. Next up, we have the Airsoft Systems 85 round MidCap mag. The Airsoft Systems 85 round mag is coming in actually at just about 88 rounds. So, you know, within margin of error, favoring higher. So next up, we have the Elite Force 140 round MidCap. And from the Elite Force 140 round MidCap, we have about 137 rounds. So again, margin of error. Next up, we have the G&P 130 round metal Stanag. From the G&P 130 round MidCap, we have about 126 rounds out of here. However, the issue I have here is that I can't get these other BBs to come out of the mag. You may be able to see that there are still BBs in the magazine. There are still BBs in the magazine. However, the magazine is not pushing all of them out, and it is more than one. So I'm gonna see if I can get these out and see if that makes up the difference in the capacity, but as far as I'm concerned, it's not a good start for these mags. Actually, there is a jam. As you can see, this particular G&P 130 round MidCap has a jam where the feed track narrows to go from the double stack to a single feed. So it appears that there is actually a issue with these G&P MidCaps, or at least this one. So if I add in the BBs that are stuck in this magazine, we do get a total capacity of 130 rounds. However, the fact that the magazine is jamming up before you can empty it doesn't really impress me much. I have tested all these magazines in much the same type of manner off camera, and this magazine, no matter what I do, short of lubricating, will continue to do this every single time I go to use or unload it. It jams up with about 5 more rounds left in the magazine right at that point. So what ends up happening is you don't know whether your magazine is full or empty because there are multiple BBs still in the magazine when in reality those BBs won't feed. Not impressed. So as a result, I'm gonna call this mag not recommended pretty much automatically just for that, but I am going to allow it to continue to compete in the test because it might be a quality control issue. But let me tell you something, none of the other mags I have do this. Of the 24 mags on this table, all of them had the same chance to have this kind of issue, and this one did. Bad luck, G&P. Next up, we have the PTS EPM. And we have 150 rounds out of the PTS EPM. So the PTS EPM also on point. Next, we have the SOCOM Gear Troy magazine. And the SOCOM Gear Troy magazine actually comes in at just over 200 rounds. So, plot twist. Yeah, looks like the SOCOM Gear Troy magazine is coming in at about 203 rounds. So that's 13 more rounds than the advertised capacity. I guess that's a good thing. Next, we have the MAG 190 round MidCap. And the MAG 190 round MidCap comes in at 190 rounds. So, right on. Next up is the MAG 130 round plastic MidCap. And the MAG 130 round plastic MidCap comes in closer to 120. So, not within margin of error, and I loaded it to the point where I thought it was gonna split almost. So, this seems to be about 10 rounds under capacity. Next up, we have the VFC 120 round metal MidCap. And the VFC 120 round MidCap, 119 rounds, Margin of error, so that one's good. Next up, we have the 6mm Pro Shop 140 round magazine. And the 6mm Pro Shop 140 round magazine got about 138 rounds, margin of error. Next up, we have the Tipman 120 round magazine. And the Tipman comes in right around 119 rounds, margin of error, it's good. Next up, we have the Matrix SEMA 150 round metal mid-cap. All right, yeah, we just closed the side door here, so the lighting just got a lot different just because there's a chainsaw outside. So the 150 round SEMA Matrix mid-cap comes in at about 130 rounds. Quite different from its advertised capacity. Next, we have the SEMA 190 round HK416 style mag. And the SEMA 190 round mag comes in at about 198 rounds. So again, a little over the advertised capacity for one of these 190 rounders. Next, we have the SOCOM Gear Lancer 190 round mid-cap. And the SOCOM Gear Lancer mid-cap comes in around 186 rounds. So, you know, pretty close, but not quite. Again, maybe within margin of error. Next up, we have the Modify XTC 190 round mid-cap. And the Modify XTC 190 round mid-cap comes in at about 193 rounds. So, good to go. Next up, we have the Garter 140 round blue box mid-cap. And the Garter blue box comes in at exactly 140 rounds. Next, we have the KWA K120. And the KWA K120 comes in at 121 rounds, so good to go. Next up, we have the ENC 160 round metal mid-cap. And the ENC 160 round mid-cap comes in quite short at about 138 rounds. And finally, we have the EVIC 190 round BAMF magazine. And the BAMF magazine comes in at exactly 190 rounds. Of all the mags on the table, most of them came in around their advertised capacity. Few of them didn't, few of them were over. But in general, most of them were right around there or within a decent margin of error, bearing in mind that this is not the most precise counting method and that I'm loading this with BBs with a speed loader and all that kind of stuff. So generally speaking, pretty good with the capacity side of things. Except of course for this GMP that likes to jam up when it reaches the end of the mag. That's pretty unfortunate. I don't consider that a very good thing, because then as the spring wears out, what's going to happen if there's that kind of issue with the area from the double to the single stack? I don't think the GMP is particularly good here. And then the Matrix SEMA mag came in about 130 rounds instead of 150 as they advertise on their website. What's the deal with that? And then the ENC mag also came in quite short of its advertised capacity. So those mags didn't do so hot in matching up with the advertised capacity. So now we're gonna take all these mags and do a high RPS full auto feeding test. Okay, so now we're outside and I have here, courtesy of Gun Gamer's teammate Ben, thank you very much for letting me borrow this. I have a 416 that has a Polar Star jack in it, and we've got this thing cranking at about 45 rounds per second. So this part of the test is going to serve two purposes. Number one, we'll see whether or not each of these mags fits in a VFC 416 body, which is notoriously a bit picky. And two, if it does fit, we'll see how it feeds at 45 rounds per second with Elite Force 0.25 gram BBs. In no particular order again, we'll start out with the EVIC 190 round BAMF mag. And this guy will go in, and it seems like it engages, but it actually won't lock. So the EVIC BAMF mag seems just wrong for locking into the 416. But it may feed yet, so we'll see if that's the case. And she will not feed. So the EVIC BAMF mag does not fit or feed in a 416. Moving on. We have the 6mm Pro Shop 140 rounder. This guy fits, locks in, decent fit. We'll see if it feeds. All right, does feed. So let's see if it feeds a full auto. And that's the entire magazine with no hiccups at 45 rounds per second. Although it does appear as if we have a jam in the magazine. So if you see here, there is one round left in the magazine. Maybe you can see that. Maybe if I can get it out. There is one round that was left in the magazine, and the follower did not quite go all the way back up to the top. So it looks like the follower and the spring are just a little short, and it retains just 1 round in there. Next up, we have the Mag 130 round magazine. Fits, no problem, locks in. Feeds, let's see if it does full auto. Once again, that's the entire magazine, no hiccups, and it is completely empty, retained no ammo. Next, let's try the SOCOM Gear Lancer magazine. Took a little bit of effort, but yeah, went in there. Nice fit, but I was able to pull it out without depressing the magazine catch. So it will lock, but it seems like if you wiggle it, so the SOCOM gear will fit and it'll lock, but if you wiggle it, you can get it to fall out without hitting the magazine release. So bear that in mind if you're looking at getting these Lancer mags for an HK416. But will it feed? Does seem to feed fine. I'm running this thing at a really low PSI, so if I pull the trigger and nothing happens, that's because I'm running this at 45, 50 PSI to stretch how far the air goes. But let's see if it does full auto. Entire magazine, no hiccups, all rounds emptied. So there we go, the Lancer magazine feeds well at 45 rounds per second with Elite Force 2.5s, and it does lock into a 416, but it can fall out without pressing the mag catch. Next, we have the Mag 190 round MidCap. Does fit, lock in, does not wiggle out of the 416. Getting really low on air. Seems like it might be double feeding, so let's see if it does it in full auto. Okay, bit of weirdness there. So every single round fed, and it did keep up on full auto, but it seemed like it was hiccuping or double feeding a bit, and I'm not sure if that's the magazine or if that's its compatibility with this body and setup. We'll find out during the compatibility test, but it did keep up with the 45 rounds per second, maybe a little too well. Next, we'll try the Garter Blue Box 140 round magazine. That is like it was made for it. So that's perfect, absolutely perfect fit. It's the PSI we're running at. Seems like it's having a couple of hiccups on semi-auto. Again, that might come down to how low of a PSI I'm running this at, but let's see about full. Couple of hiccups as it was warming up, but then it went right as it was supposed to and fed every single round. So some of this might come down to the gun setup, but in general, the Garter seemed to fit fine, even drops free. And I didn't check that with the Mag MidCap either. Also drops free. The SOCOM gear does not drop free. The 6mm Pro Shop drops free, and the Mag 130 rounder drops free. So there's all those. Next up, let's do the VFC QRS mag. Predictably enough, VFC mag fits into a VFC body. Feeds just fine, actually. Absolutely no hiccups on full auto. So every single round emptied. Does not drop free, but it does fit and feed. Next, let's try the Ares Amoeba MidCap. You have to give it a little bit of extra effort to get it to lock. You have to kind of wiggle it in a little bit, but it's tight in there and it's not coming out. Let's see if it feeds. Perfect feeding. Now let's see about full auto. Absolutely no hiccups, fed every single round, does not drop free from the magwell, but yeah, so the Amoeba, good to go at 45 rounds per second. Next we have the PTS E-Mag, old school. Of course this fits, it's made to fit 416s and Euro style receivers. See if it feeds. Feeds. Now let's see about full auto. No hiccups, and it does drop free. Next, we have the SEMA 416 style Stanag. Hopefully this fits. Does fit. Fits like it was made for it again. Not wiggling out. Seems like a decent fit. See about feeding on semi. Does feed on semi-auto. Now let's try full. no issues keeping up on full auto, and it fed every single round. And it does drop free. Next, we have the Tipman 120 rounder. Ooh, that's a tight fit. You have to really slap it to get it in there. No movement in there. It's tight. Now let's see if it feeds. Seems to feed. Let's try full auto. No issues on full auto. You gotta really strip it to get it out, but it did feed every round on full auto with no hiccups. Next, we have the Elite Force 140 round MidCap. That fits. Very good fit. Doesn't seem to want to wiggle out. Let's see if it feeds. Does feed. Let's try full auto. No hiccups. Doesn't quite drop free. Seems to get hung up halfway down. But fits and feeds, no issues. Fed every single round, no hiccups. Next, we have the Airsoft Systems 85 round MidCap. This does not seem to want to go in. So this will not go into the gun. Don't know if it's just this gun. I've actually been messing with this Airsoft Systems mag for a little bit since I got it, and doesn't seem to fit well into anything. So doesn't work with a 416, and we'll do the compatibility test and see what it does work with. So next we have the ENC 160, or should I say about 138 round magazine. Goes in, pretty good fit. Doesn't want to seem to wiggle out. Let's see if it feeds. Feeds, no issue. Now let's see about full auto. That is all the ammo, no hiccups, with .25s at 45 rounds per second. Let's try the SOCOM Gear Troy magazine. Goes in, no problem, but same as the Lancer mag, it will wiggle out on you, but it locks in, no issue. But let's see if it feeds. Feeding is no issue. What about full auto? At 45 rounds per second, seems to work just fine, and it does not quite drop free. Next, let's try the Hex mag. That goes in no problem, seems to be a very good fit, but this will wiggle out on you if you wiggle it. So it'll lock in, but you can wiggle it out. Let's see if it feeds. Feeding no problem, full auto. Seemed like we had one minor hiccup there actually, but it did continue to shoot, so I don't know, one minor hiccup. Next we've got the PTS EPM. Great fit, no issues, not wiggling out. What about feeding? Feeding fine. Now let's see about full auto. Full auto, no issue, and does drop free, fed every single round. No problems there. Next, we have the Modify XTC MidCap. I did sand the ridge on the back of these all the way down to both maximize compatibility and because it wouldn't fit in any of my guns if I didn't. So let's see if it goes in a 416. It does. Very nice fit, not much movement at all, will not wiggle out. Let's see if it feeds. Feeding is no problem. Now let's see about full auto. Absolutely no hiccups. Does not quite drop free. Seems to get a little bit hung up, but does work, fits and feeds, no problem, and keeps up with 45 rounds per second. Next, we have the G&P High RPS 130 round MidCap. Ooh. Okay, that is a really snug fit. Definitely not going anywhere. I can't get it to wiggle out because it won't wiggle, but it is locked in. Let's see if it feeds. Will feed on semi. Let's see about full auto. Lived up to the high RPS name, did feed. Very difficult to strip out, but every single round ended up out of there. So it did feed on 45 rounds per second, keeping up with the high RPS name, I suppose. Next, we have the VFC 120 round Stanag. Absolutely perfect fit. Doesn't seem to want to wiggle out, is locked in. Let's see if it feeds. Does feed, no issue. Now let's see about full auto. No problems. Does not drop free, but fit and fed, no problem. KWA K120. Ooh. Let's see here. Okay, I can get it to go in if I slap it hard on the bottom, but it doesn't seem to want to go in without a fight. You really need to fight with it and give it that hard slap to get it to go in. So half and half on 416 compatibility. Not moving at all while it's in here, but let's see if it feeds. Nothing. So the K120 is a failure for 416 compatibility. Next we have the G&G 120 round MidCap. Really stiff to get in there, but I was able to get it in without a super slap. Won't wiggle out. Let's see if it feeds. Does feed. Now let's try full auto. Every single round is out of there, no issue. And it fed all the BBs, even the ones in the hop-up track, because of that sweet, sweet little follower. So it did fit and feed, just barely. No shot of falling free on this one, and you really do have to give it a nice shove to get in there. Next up, we have the SEMA 150 round, also known as Matrix, closer to 130 rounds as we saw inside. So that goes in, seems to fit pretty decently, a little bit of wiggle, but will not wiggle out on you. Does feed. Now let's try full auto. Absolutely keeps up on full auto, no issues. And we have the G&P 130 round problem child. I am gonna let this one keep being in the test. Okay, that is not going in, period, the end. No 416 compatibility. Okay, so that is all of these magazines tested with .25s at 45 rounds per second. The only minor hiccup we had was the hex mag seemed to have like a little bit of a skip halfway through. So now I'm gonna do a real torture test, and I'm gonna put ASG 0.4 gram BBs in all of these. And when I do that, we'll see who really reigns at the 45 round per second mark, if all of those will continue to feed even when you put heavier ammo in there. So while I was loading up the magazines for the 0.4 gram test, I ran into an issue with the hex mag. The hex mag is completely jammed up. You can hear those all sloshing around in there. I tried clearing it out, but none of them are coming up to the top unless I tilt it upside down. The follower is totally jammed up. And that was just happened when I loaded it with the Odin speed loader. I felt it get resistance for a couple of cranks, and once I did that, I had a feeling that it might have just jammed up. I took it out, tried to empty it, and this is what I got. I didn't even fully load it. Just I was about halfway through loading it, I think, probably, and felt resistance for a couple of cranks, and that was when I realized that it must have become lodged. I've seen this with hex mags before. The follower will go off to the side, a BB will get lodged next to the follower, and now the follower won't move freely. So the hex mag is jammed up. This usually requires taking the magazine apart to resolve it. So the hex mag is out of the test. It just did not work. Okay, so now we have all the magazines that did fit and feed with the 416, loaded with 0.4 gram BBs from ASG. And again, these were just purchased from Amped Airsoft, and I'm going to be using them in all these magazines at 45 rounds per second to see if the magazines can keep up with feeding heavy BBs at a high rate of fire. Let's start out, again, in no particular order, but let's start out with the PTS EPM. Couple of double feeds to start, but it seems to be feeding now. Let's see if it feeds in full auto. As you heard there, it started hiccuping as the spring was losing tension toward the top of the magazine. So it did feed every round, but it started hiccuping and couldn't quite keep up toward the end. Next, let's try the G&G 120 round. Seems to feed no issue on semi. Some pretty significant hiccups throughout on full auto. and it did not feed every round. Let's try that again. The magazine seems to no longer be feeding. Try one more time. Feeding now. And with some more hiccups, it did fully empty the magazine. But yeah, hiccups throughout. Let's try the VFC QRS. Feeding on semi, it seems like. Let's try full. A lot of hiccups to start, seemed like a solid middle, and then a few more hiccups toward the end. Did not flawlessly feed. Next, let's try the Mag 190 round MidCap. Seems to be no issues on semi. Let's try full. Definitely some hiccups there. Would not fully keep up at 45 rounds per second with 0.4 gram BBs. Next, let's try Lancer. Seems to work on semi. Let's try full auto. Definitely a lot of hiccups, but it did feed every round. Let's try the E&C 160 round. Seems to work fine on semi. You're seeing some of these dribble. Again, that's because I'm using it at a low PSI, and I don't think the setup is quite perfect, but I'm just counting how many BBs come out. That's purely what I'm using for the evaluation of feeding. Now let's try full auto. A lot of hiccups. Fed every round, but a lot of hiccups, as you could hear. Let's try the Garter. This one I'm actually expecting to do kind of well. I think this has the strongest spring in the bunch, but we'll see. Uh-oh, we've got a jam in the gun itself. Or maybe not. We're getting jams. So this is actually jamming. If I put another magazine in, Elite Force, random. That seems to be working fine. But the Garter, which you saw feed flawlessly earlier in the same gun, seems to be jamming up every now and then. It seems like it's going now, so let's try it now. Funny enough, I actually think the high tension spring in this was causing the BBs to get stuck. And then as the magazine cleared out, then it started feeding just fine. So I actually think the spring was too tense maybe. That's my going theory because that started working. All right, next we have the Elite Force. Feeding, full auto. As you could hear, some definite hiccups. Fed every round, but some definite hiccups. Could not quite keep up. Let's try the 6mm Pro Shot. Feeding kind of intermittently on semi. Let's try full. Yeah, the feeding was certainly interesting there. Retained a couple of rounds. It actually seems like the spring is getting worse and losing tension as I'm using it. So the more I use the 6mm Pro Shot mag, the further that follower is sitting down at rest. I don't think the spring on this is very good. And then it had some issues feeding right off the gate. Kept going with some hiccups, but seemed like it was double feeding or getting stuck or something. Not particularly good performance here. Let's try the Mag 130 round MidCap. Seems fine on semi. Definitely some hiccups there, but it did feed every round, so there you go. And I didn't get any malfunctions or any weird shots with that one. Next, we have the SOCOM Gear Troy magazine. Seems okay on semi generally. Couple of spots where it skipped, and yeah, overall had some trouble keeping up with 45 rounds per second. Next, let's try the SEMA 190 round mid-cap. Seems like it is jamming up, much like the blue box. Will not feed. There it goes, just cleared out a big jam. Definitely a few double feeds in the bunch. It kept up actually a little too well. Seemed like it was double feeding a little bit, but it did feed every round. And it was jamming up near the beginning with the 0.4 gram BBs. Next we have the Tippmann 120 round. Took a couple, but now it seems to be feeding. Definitely some lack of feeding there. A couple of hiccups. Couldn't quite keep up with the 45 rounds per second with the 0.4 gram BBs. Next we have SEMA 150 round. The SEMA Matrix, I should say. Semi-auto seems to be no issue. Let's try full. Could not quite keep up, as you could hear there. Aries Amoeba. Had a jam up initially to start. That kind of cleared itself, and then it kept going, but it started hiccuping toward the end. Next, we have the PTS EMAG. That probably kept up the best out of all of them. It kind of started off kind of wild, but then it just kept chugging and seemed to feed every round up until the very last one. So the old PTS EMAG seems to be the best performer with the 0.4s at 45 rounds per second. Next, let's try the G&P high RPS. See just how high this RPS goes. Does not seem to be feeding. High RPS, I guess, ladies and gentlemen. That did not keep up very well, didn't start well. When I switched it to full auto, it went, but choppy every single round, maybe every other round was going. So the high RPS did not do so hot. So I have 2 magazines left. Let's see yet if we can get a mag with no hiccups throughout. Modify XTC 190 round mid-cap. Doesn't seem to be feeding every round on semi, or at least not fully processing every round. Let's try full auto. Distinct hiccups, and definitely not quite keeping up, not quite doing it. So we have one last shot, the VFC 120 round magazine. Maybe this will be the mag to finally do 0.4 grams at 45 rounds per second with no hiccups. Nope. So, ladies and gentlemen, the moral of the story here is if you're running 45 rounds per second, don't use 0.4s, or if you're running 0.4s, don't run 45 rounds per second, because there is not a mag on the market that can keep up with it. Okay, the next part of this test is we're going to test compatibility with various M4s. So, here I have a VFC Mk18, and in no order, we've got the SOCOM Gear Lancer. Went in very easily, seems to fit well. Feeds no problem for a few rounds. And yeah, drops free. So definitely works with VFC. Next we have the ENC 160 round. Yeah, definitely seems to work, seems to feed. No problems. If you notice, this gun is actually double cycling or doing full auto on semi-auto. That's because I have a motor in here that's way too nice for the low spring I have. I'm working on rebalancing this, but the gun works for the test that we're doing right now. Blue box. Fits no problem, doesn't wiggle out, feeds no issue, drops free. So the blue box is good for VFC. G&P, ooh, really, really tight fit, does lock in, feeds no problem. But you really have to strip it hard. Next up, mag, 130 round. No problems, drops free, easy. Next up, G&G, 120 round. A little stiff, but it goes in. Feeds no problem, does not drop free. G&G, good to go for VFC. Modify, 190 round XTC. Feeds no problem, does not quite drop free. Next we have the SEMA, 150 round, SEMA Matrix, whatever you want to call it. That took a little bit of effort to get in just because there were some BBs still in the hop-up channel and they started falling out as I put it in, but all right, so yeah, it takes a little effort to put in actually. It seems like the track needs to line itself, but goes in, feeds no problem, drops free. EPM, fits perfectly, does not wiggle out, feeds, drops free. VFC QRS, fits in a VFC receiver naturally, and it feeds and drops free. Perfect. Next we have the mag, 190 round MidCap. Fits, feeds, drops free. SEMA, 190 round, HK416. Fits, feeds, not quite drop free. Nope, not quite a drop free, but it does fit and feed. Ares, Amoeba. Fits, does not wobble. Well, does wobble out. Feeds, drops free. SOCOM Gear Troy. Fits, feeds, drops free. VFC, 120 rounds. Fits, feeds, drops free. PTS EMAG. Fits, feeds, drops free. Elite Force, 140 round. Fits, feeds, drops free. BAMF. Fits, feeds, drops free. Tipman. Fits, stiff, no wobble, not wobbling out. Feeds, does not drop free. Next we have the 6mm Pro Shop, which I just hit the lip against the magwell and it just shot out, but fits, feeds, drops free. KWA K120, fits, feeds, drops free. GMP, not going into a VFC receiver. Airsoft Systems, fits, but I can pull it out. Same problem I had on the 416. We'll see if it feeds. Does feed. Remarkably well, actually, but it shoots itself out of the gun, so do not recommend. And even though the Hex Mag is out of the test for having jammed up, it does fit and drop free, and when it works, it seems to feed. I have a few of these I use personally, and this does seem to be an issue where sometimes the follower will just randomly jam up. So unfortunate, Hex Mag. There's 23 other magazines here that didn't do that, so sorry for your luck. Okay, now we're gonna test fit and feed in Krytac. This is a Krytac LMG, which might seem a strange choice. My CRB, the MOSFET went after about 2.5 years, so doesn't seem to be working right now. It's popping fuses left and right, so I'm using my LMG, which is still working perfectly. Same magwell though, so it'll work. First, we'll do the Tipman, why not? Ooh, really stiff to get in there, but it does lock. Does it feed? Does feed? And you gotta really yank that out, but it will work. Next, we have the 6mm Pro Shop. Fits just fine. Seems to feed. Drops free. Next, we have the Elite Force 140 rounds. Fits. Feeds. Does not drop free. Need to strip in. That takes some effort, actually. Next, we have the BAMF. Fits. Feeds. Does not quite drop free. SOCOM Gear Troy. fits, feeds, does not quite drop free. VFC 120 round. Yes, that's what that is. Fits, feeds, does not drop free, needs to be stripped. Airsoft systems. Will not lock in, will not feed. This mag sucks. I haven't found a gun it feeds in yet. Let's try the G&P. Ooh. G&P will not go. G&G. Stiff, but it'll go in. Fits. Feeds. Does not drop free. EPM. Fits. Won't wobble out. Feeds. Not quite drop free. Then we have the E&C 160 round. Fits. Feeds. Not quite drop free. KWA K120. Fits. Feeds. Drops free. PTS E-Mag. Fits. Feeds. Not quite drop free. Modify 190 round XTC. Fits. Feeds. Does not drop free. SEMA 150 round. Fits. Feeds. Not quite drop free. MAG 130 round. Fits. Locked in. Doesn't wobble out. Feeds. Drops free. Next we have the SOCOM Gear Lancer. Fits. Wobbles out. Let's see if the Troy does that, because I forgot to check the Troy. Nope. The Troy, you cannot pull out or wiggle out. The Lancer, you put that in, you can wiggle it out. But it does feed, it does drop free. I think I forgot to check that on the Mark 18. Yeah, the Lancer mag will wobble out of the Mark 18 as well. So the Lancer mag has some problems. We have the Ares Amoeba MidCap. Fits just fine, doesn't wobble out. Feeds, does not drop free. Have to strip it. SEMA 416 190 round. Fits. Feeds, does not drop free. MAG 190. Fits. Feeds. Does not drop free. G&P high RPS 130. Fits. Stiff. Very stiff. Feeds. Very hard to get out. Obviously does not drop free. Blue Box 140 round Garter MidCap. Fits just fine. Seems to chop the BBs a little bit. They're not hopping quite properly. But it does feed. Does not drop free. VFC QRS MidCap. Fits just fine. Does not wobble out. Feeds perfectly. Does not drop free. Okay, so now I'm at the inside range at River City Airsoft, and they were kind enough to let me borrow some of the guns from their wall just to put a few rounds through them and see which of these mags work with which one of them. Right here I have a King Arms M4 CQBR. For no reason in particular, this is the first one, and for no reason in particular, the one we'll start with is the ever so troublesome G&P. We'll see if maybe we finally have a gun this fits in. Oh my God, it fits and locks in. Let's see if it feeds. Feeds, does not drop free, but it comes out, and I don't even have to brace it with my knee to pull it out. So the G&P mag does fit and does feed in a King Arms. Next, we have the SEMA Matrix 150 round. Goes in, easy, doesn't wobble out. It does feed, and it does drop free. Next, we have the Ares Amoeba mag. Goes in, no problem. Doesn't wobble out, fits very nicely. Feeds, no problem. Drops free. Next, we have the VFC 120 round. Goes in, but you need to give it a little bit of an extra push to get it to lock. It does feed, and it does drop free. Next, we have the PTS E-Mag. Goes in, no problem. Doesn't seem to wobble out, but it is a kind of loose fit. Feeds no issue, drops free. Now we have the Elite Force 140 round in the King Arms M4 CQBR. Goes in, fits, no, not coming out. Feeds, drops free. Then we have the SOCOM Gear Lancer magazine. Fits and wobbles right out. So yeah, this one loves to wobble out, but it does fit. And it is misfeeding. So the SOCOM Gear Lancer mag, not so hot in King Arms. Next we have the PTS EPM. Fits in, no problem, pretty good fit, not wobbling its way off. Feeds, drops free. Next up, we have the Modify 190 round XTC MidCap. Fits very nicely, not coming out. Feeds, drops free. The Hex Mag, which will not feed because it's still locked up, but it fits nicely, drops free. But it will not feed because it's locked up. VFC 120 round QRS MidCap. Fits nicely. Ooh. Fits, but you gotta give it a little bit of a push. And it fits very nicely in here, actually. Not any movement, really. Feeds, drops free. The King Arms seems to have a very forgiving magwell, actually. We have the KWA K120. Fits nicely, no real wobble, not coming out. Feeds, drops free. Next we have the 6mm Pro Shot. Fits in very nicely, not wobbling out. Feeds, drops free. The EVIC BAMF mag in the King Arms M4. Fits pretty nicely, not wobbling its way out. Feeds, and it does drop free. But I caught it before it dropped totally. SEMA 190 round HK416 style midcap. Fits nicely, not wobbling its way out. Feeds, drops free. SOCOM Gear Troy. Fits in and wobbles its way out if you give it a wiggle, but it does fit and lock, but if you wiggle it, it'll fall out. But it does feed, and it does drop free. MAG 190 round MidCap metal magazine. Fits in nicely, not too much wobble, not coming out. Feeds, drops free. G&P high RPS midcap. Fits in pretty easily, not wobbling its way out. Feeds very nicely, does not drop free. Tipman 120 round polymer midcap. Fits nicely in the King Arms, not wobbling its way out. Feeds very nicely, does not drop free. Got to strip it with a little bit of effort. Blue Box 140 round. Fits very nicely, not wobbling its way out. Feeds, drops free. G&G 120 round GR16 midcap. Fits, not wobbling its way out. Feeds, does not drop free, but pretty simple to strip. Or easy, I should say. VFC E&C 160 round midcap. Fits, not wobbling its way out. Feeds, drops free. Next we have the MAG 130 round midcap. Fits in, not wobbling its way out, feeds, drops free. And finally, we have the Airsoft Systems M4 MidCap, which has not fed and locked in any gun I've tried it in. Maybe the King Arms, which seems to be very forgiving, will finally give it a home. It locks in, but you can pull it right back out because the engagement's pretty shallow, but it does lock in. Nope. No, Airsoft Systems, this mid-cap seems to be a miss in pretty much everything I've tried it in. Maybe we'll yet find one, but I'm not holding out hope. Next up, we have the ICS CXP. I can't quite fit the battery in the handguard, so the handguard's staying off for this one. But we'll start off with the problem child of the group, the Airsoft Systems mag. No dice, won't lock in. This mag sucks. Don't buy it, ever. Tippmann at 120 round mid-cap. Fits when the battery isn't coming unplugged. It feeds, and then it does not drop free, so you have to strip it. But it does fit and feed in the ICS. G&P, high RPS mid-cap. Very tight fit, but it does fit. Feeds, and with some effort, you strip it. Blue Box, 140 round mid-cap. Fits, and with a little bit of extra effort, you have to give it a little bit of a bump, then it locks in and fits nicely, but it will engage the hop up before the lock, so you do have to make sure you push it in far enough. It does need a little bit of extra effort, but it fits. Feeds, does not quite drop free. Next up, we have the ENC 160 round mid-cap. Fits in, doesn't wobble out, feeds. Ooh, I didn't see if it dropped free. Drops free. SOCOM Gear Troy mid-cap. Fits, does not wobble its way out, feeds, drops free. Next we have the G&G polymer mid-cap. Fits, not wobbling its way out, feeds, does not drop free. It doesn't take a ton of effort to strip. Next we have the MAG 190 round mid-cap. Fits, doesn't wobble its way out, feeds, drops free. Next, we have the VFC QRS mid-cap. Fits, does not wobble out, feeds, does not quite drop free. Next, we have the 6mm Pro Shop 140 round mid-cap. Fits, doesn't wobble its way out, feeds, drops free. Next up, we have the PTS EPM. Fits, doesn't wobble out, feeds, drops free. Next up, we have the EVIC BAMF mag. Fits, doesn't wobble out, feeds, drops free. KWA K120 in the ICS CXP. Fits, does not wobble out, feeds, drops free. Modify 190 round XTC mid-cap. Fits, does not wobble out, feeds, does not drop free. SOCOM Gear Lancer. Fits, wobbles out again if you wiggle it, but it does lock in, feeds, and drops free. Elite Force 140 round. Fits, doesn't wiggle out, feeds, drops free. SEMA 150 round. Fits, does not wiggle out. Feeds, does not drop free. Aries Amoeba MidCap fits very nicely, does not wiggle out. Feeds, drops free. SEMA 190 round 416 style MidCap fits, doesn't wiggle out. Feeds, drops free. Old school PTS EPM, or excuse me, old school PTS EMAG fits, doesn't wiggle out. Feeds, drops free. MAG 130 round MidCap fits, doesn't wiggle out. Feeds, drops free. Hex Mag fits, locked up, can't test feeding, drops free. VFC 120 round MidCap fits, does not wiggle out. Feeds, drops free but sluggishly, so you may have to strip it if your magwell's dirty at all. And then the G&P Problem Child 130 round metal Stanag fits, needs some effort to push it in, but it fits. Feeds, and of course does not drop free. So that's ICS compatibility. Next up, we have a Tokyo Marui Patriot M4. So this is the TM spec magwell. We'll see how close these guys stuck. First, Hex Mag does not go in. The Hex Mag does not go into the TM magwell. What about the G&P? The G&P goes into the TM magwell. And it feeds, does not drop free, and it takes a little effort to strip. Next, we have the VFC 120 round MidCap. Goes in, does not feed. So the VFC will not feed in a Tokyo Marui. If I give it a boost, it will, but as it sits standard, ooh, now it's feeding. So it seems like the VFC mag has a little bit of a tricky fitment where you have to give it an extra tap or boost in order to get it to work. So if you have a TM, you may just need to give that some extra love, but then it becomes a little tricky to strip. So a little big for the magwell. Next we have the MAG 130 round MidCap. Fits in perfectly, doesn't wobble out, feeds perfectly, and drops free. So it seems like MAG stuck pretty close to TM spec. Next we have the PTS EMAG. Fits, no problem, no wobble. Feeds, does not drop free. Next we have the SEMA 190 round MidCap. Fits in, no problem. Feeds, no problem. Does not drop free. Next up, Aries Amoeba MidCap. Fits in, no problem, doesn't wobble out. Feeds, no problem, does not drop free. SEMA 150 round. Fits in, no issue, no fuss. Feeds, no problem, does not drop free. Elite Force 140 round MidCap. Goes in, no issue, no fuss. Feeds, does not drop free. SOCOM Gear Lancer. Finally a magwell. Oh, no. If you wiggle it, it'll wiggle out without pressing the mag release. But it does fit, it does lock in. You can wiggle it out though. But it does feed, and it does not drop free. Something is up with this mag where it just loves to wiggle out. Next, Modify 190 round XTC MidCap. Fits no problem, doesn't wiggle out. Feeds no problem, does not drop free. Next, KWA K120. Fits in no problem, doesn't wobble out. Feeds no problem, not quite drop free. Airsoft Systems, why am I even bothering? Yeah, no. I don't know why I'm still bothering. Doesn't work. Next, Tipman, 120 round. A little stiff, but it goes in and locks in. Not wobbling out. Feeds, does not drop free. A little stiff to strip. Next, G&P high RPS MidCap. A little stiff, but it does go in. Feeds, does not drop free. Pretty stiff to strip. Garter Blue Box 140 round MidCap. Goes in perfectly, no wobble, not coming out. Ooh, seemed like it was chopping there actually. So it feeds, but one or two of the BBs looked like they chopped and didn't quite go properly. So half and half on whether or not it feeds in here. Does not drop free. Next, we have the E&C 160 round MidCap. Fits in, no problem, not wobbling out. Feeds perfectly, drops free. Next up, SOCOM Gear Troy magazine. Fits, no problem, no wobble. And it actually, if you press on the side of the magazine here, you can get it to come out. But it does fit and it does lock in, and if I pull it, not putting pressure on that side, it doesn't come out. But if I press here with my thumb, I can get it to come out. Maybe you can see what I'm talking about. But it does fit. Feeds, does not drop free. It actually takes some effort to strip. G&G 120 round MidCap. Fits pretty damn well. Does not wobble free. Feeds pretty well. Does not drop free. Mag 190 round MidCap. Fits perfectly. Not wobbling out. And the first few of those did not feed well. So let's try that one more time. Seems like we had a little bit of a hiccup there with the first round of feeding. So mag metal MidCap may or may not work with TM. VFC QRS MidCap. Fits in pretty well, but much like the metal, needs that little bit of an extra push to get it to lock in. But once it's in, feeds perfectly, does not drop free. 6mm Pro Shop, 140 round magazine. Goes in, fits very nicely. Feeds perfectly, drops free. PTS EPM. PTS EPM. Does not seem to want to go in. The EPM does not seem to want to lock into the TM body. However, it is engaging the hop up, so technically if you hold it in place, it feeds. It doesn't drop free, but it doesn't lock in either. So PTS EPM doesn't work with Tokyo Marui. EVIC BAMF Mag. Fits perfectly, not wobbling out. Feeds perfectly, drops free. And that's it for the Tokyo Marui. Now we have a G&G Predator, so this will test which mags work in G&G guns. Start right off with the problem child. Airsoft Systems, this is officially your worst product since the first run of ASCUs. Good job. EVIC BAMF Mag and G&G Predator fits perfectly, does not wobble out. Feeds no problem, drops free. VFC QRS MidCap fits perfectly, not wiggling out. Feeds perfectly, does not drop free. PTS EPM fits perfectly. Does not have any trouble feeding. drops free. Mag, 190 round mid-cap. Fits perfectly. Feeds perfectly. Drops free perfectly. KWA K120. Fits. Doesn't wiggle out. Ooh. Seems kind of iffy on feeding. It's skipping every now and then, but it does drop free. This is the 6mm Pro Shop 140 round mid-cap. Fits. Doesn't wiggle out. Feeds. Drops free. G&G 120 round. Fits logically. Feeds logically, but does not drop free. SOCOM Gear Troy mid-cap. Fits. And it'll do the same thing where if I thumb press it, I'll talk about these SOCOM Gear mags separately at the end. But yeah, it does fit, does lock in. Feeds. Does not quite drop free. E&C 160 round mid-cap. Fits, doesn't wibble out. Feeds, drops free. Garter Blue Box 140 round mid-cap. Fits. Feeds, drops free. G&P high RPS mid-cap. Fits, doesn't wiggle out. Feeds, does not drop free. Tipman 120 round mid-cap. Fits. Feeds, does not drop free. Ares 140 round mid-cap. Fits. No wobbling out. Feeds. Drops free. Hex Mag. Fits. Doesn't wiggle out. Also doesn't feed because it's locked up. Does not drop free. SEMA 150 round mid-cap. Fits. Feeds. Does not drop free. Elite Force 140 round mid-cap. Fits. Doesn't wibble out. Feeds. Drops free. SOCOM Gear Lancer. Fits. Wiggles out. But it does lock in. Feeds. Drops free. Modify XTC 190 round mid-cap. Fits. Doesn't wobble out. Feeds. Does not quite drop free. SEMA 190 round mid-cap. Fits. Doesn't wobble out. Feeds. Drops free. PTS EMAG old school. Fits. Doesn't wobble out. Feeds. Drops free. G&P 130 round metal Stanag. Fits. Doesn't wobble out. Feeds. Does not drop free. VFC 120 round mid-cap. Fits. Doesn't wobble out. Feeds. Does not drop free. And finally, the MAG 130 round mid-cap. Fits. Doesn't wobble out. Feeds. Drops free. And that's it for the G&G Predator. Next up, we have the Elite Force M4 CQB. These are OEM'd by Ares, so the Ares spec magwell should be the same as well. So, starting off with the MAG 130 rounder. Fits no problem, does not wobble out. Seems kind of half and half on feeding, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so kind of half and half on feeding. If I give it a little boosty up, it feeds, but it will skip unless you're giving it a little boost up. So, does not quite feed well, but it does drop free. Next, we have the VFC 120 round mid-cap. Needs a little boost to feed, get in there, but does fit well. Feeds, does not drop free. Next up, we have the G&P 130 round metal MidCap. Fits, feeds, does not drop free. Next up, we have the PTS E-Mag. Fits, needs a little bit of a boost to get past the lip, but it does fit. Doesn't wobble out. Feeds, drops free. Next up, we have the SEMA 190 round HK416 MidCap. Fits in, doesn't wobble out. Feeds, drops free. Modify XTC 190 round MidCap. Fits, feeds, drops free. SOCOM Gear Lancer. Fits. Let's wait for it. Oh my God. Oh my God. No, wiggles out. Takes a little more effort, but it does wiggle out. Does fit, lock in. Feeds, does not drop free. Next, we have the Elite Force 140 round MidCap. Fits very well. Feeds, does not quite drop free. Next up, we have the SEMA 150 round mag. SEMA Matrix, I'm using the terms interchangeably with this mag. Fits, does not wobble. Feeds, drops free. Ares 140 round Amoeba MidCap. Fits, does not wiggle out. Feeds, drops free. Makes sense, all things considered. Tipman 120 round MidCap. Fits, does not wobble out. Feeds, does not drop free. G&P 130 round MidCap. High RPS. Needs a little bit of extra effort to get in, but it does fit, doesn't wobble out. Feeds, drops free. Garter Blue Box 140 round MidCap. Fits, no problem, does not wobble out, or much at all. Feeds, drops free. E&C 160 round MidCap. Fits, doesn't wobble out. Feeds, does not, well, does drop free, excuse me. I've been doing this so much, my words are getting jumbled. SOCOM Gear Troy. Fits, doesn't wobble out, even if I do that press on the side of it. Feeds, drops free. G&G 120 round MidCap. Fits, doesn't wiggle out. Does not feed. Does drop free. If I give it a boost again, if I'm pushing it up into the mag well, it will feed, but as it rests normally, does not feed. .6mm Pro Shop 140 round MidCap in the Elite Force Ares M4 CQB. Feeds just fine, fits just fine, drops free. KWA K120. Fits, doesn't wobble out or much. Feeds, drops free. Mag 190 round MidCap. Fits, does not wobble out. Feeds, drops free, a little sluggishly, might need to strip it if your mag well is dirty. PTS EPM. Fits very nicely. Feeds, drops free. VFC QRS MidCap. Fits very nicely. Feeds, drops free. EVIC BAMF Mag. Fits in very nicely. feeds very nicely, drops free. Airsoft Systems, Why Do I Bother mag. Oh my God. No way. No way. The Airsoft Systems mag works in Elite Force, maybe probably Ares as well, because it's OEM by Ares. It works and it's locked in. Let's see if it feeds. Oh my God! I found one! The 85 round Airsoft Systems magazine will lock, fit, and stay in and feed in the Elite Force M4 CQB. So if for some reason you just have to have a stupid 85 round magazine that will never work with anything else, get a bunch of Airsoft Systems mags for your Ares or Elite Force M4. My God, I found one. Does not drop free though, so actually never mind. It's a worse choice than a bunch of the other mags on here.
That's the caveat. Take a hit that doesn't drop free.
Hex mag. Fits. Doesn't wobble out. Doesn't drop free. And I can't see if it feeds because it's locked up. One more. One more. And here we have the last M4 that we're testing with for today. The Bow Dynamics, I don't know what M4, it's a blowback adaptive weapon, I don't care. It's OEM by Lonex, so this will cover different Lonex type of M4s. I'm so done with this. This is actually really tedious. I never thought shooting could be tedious, but it is. We'll start with the EVIC Banff mag. Fits in very nicely, does not wobble free. Feeds, drops free. Holy shit, that actually feels nice to shoot. Elite Force, 140 round MidCap. Fits very nicely. Feeds, does not quite drop free. Mag, 190 round MidCap. Fits very nicely. Does not quite feed. If I give it a boost, it'll feed, but as it sits, now it's feeding. Let's try that again. I don't know, little iffy. May depend on placement, but it was fully locked in when it didn't feed, as you heard. But, so I don't know, little iffy. But it does drop free. SOCOM Gear Troy locks in. Doesn't wobble out even when pressing on the side. Feeds, drops free. SOCOM Gear Lancer MidCap. Fits and wobbles out just like it does on pretty much everything else. Don't buy SOCOM Gear Lancer MidCaps if you want your MidCaps to stay in. But it does feed except one misfeed. So yeah, kind of iffy on feeding. Does not drop free either. PTS EPM fits in very nicely. Does not wobble out or much at all. Feeds, drops free. VFC QRS MidCap. Needs some finagling to get it in there, but once it's in, it's solid. Feeds and drops free a bit sluggishly. KWA K120 MidCap. Fits in pretty nicely. Little iffy on feeding. Drops free. But the K120 may or may not feed correctly. 6mm Pro Shop, 140 round MidCap. Fits nicely. Feeds, drops free. G&G, 120 round MidCap. Okay, you need to really finagle it to get it in there, but it can get in there. Once it's in, it's solid. Does feed, does not drop free. But you need to really finagle to get it in there. Tippmann, 120 round MidCap. Fits in, very solid. feeds, does not drop free. G&P 130 round high RPS mid-cap. Fits in, does not wobble out. Feeds, does not drop free. Garter blue box 140 round mid-cap. Fits in very nicely. Feeds, does not drop free. E&C 160 round mid-cap. Fits in, doesn't wobble out. Feeds, but it skipped one there, so yeah, it's skipping every now and then. So feeding is iffy, but it does drop free. PTS EMAG. Fits in very nicely. Doesn't wobble out. Feeds. Does not drop free. Modify XTC 190 round mid-cap. Takes a little bit of doing, but it fits in there nicely and it's solid. Feeds. Does not drop free. Ares Amoeba 140 round mid-cap. Definitely needs a few tries to get it to lock in there, but it does lock in and feels nice. Feeds, drops free. SEMA 190 round mid-cap. Needs a little bit of an adjusting to get in there, but it does, and it locks in very nicely. Feeds very nicely. Does not drop free. MAG 130 round mid-cap. Fits in. Locks in solid. Does not feed. I give it a boost, and it does feed. If I don't give it a boost, it does not. So, as it sits, will not feed. VFC 120 round mid-cap. Needs a little bit of effort, but it does lock in. Feeds, drops free, little sluggishly. G&P 130 round mid-cap. All right, needs some finesse, but it will get in there. And it will feed, and it will not drop free. SEMA Matrix 150 round. Fits in very nicely, not wobbling out. Feeds very nicely, does not drop free. Why do I bother? Airsoft Systems. Another one that the Airsoft Systems, nope, never mind. It can pull right out without hitting the mag catch. But it will lock in, even though it will wiggle out. And it will lock in. It'll even feed. And oh my God, it'll drop free. And then we have the Hex Mag. Hex Mag needs a few tries, needs a lot of finesse, but it will go in, will lock in solidly, and it will drop free. Can't test if it'll feed because this one's locked up. And that is the full compatibility test of all the guns that I had available right now to test the compatibility of these various mid-caps. So, next, I'm going to leave all of these mags loaded for probably about 2 weeks, and then I'm gonna empty them out in a gun and see if they still feed well. Now, leaving mags loaded should not really be much of a torture test as long as your springs are good. If your springs are not good, then a couple weeks loaded might be a problem. So we'll see what happens with that. Until next time, see you in a couple of weeks. We're back after 2 weeks off. So all of these magazines have been loaded for 2 weeks with the exception of the Hex Mag. I just left that one jammed for 2 weeks, unjammed it last night, and then loaded it. So all these mags have had their springs compressed for 2 weeks. They're all loaded with 0.25 gram BBs, and that is what I'm calling the spring torture test. Now again, if the springs are decent, this probably shouldn't be an issue for them. But if the springs have a bad heat treat or something, we'll find out. But before I even bother shooting to see if the springs are okay, I'm going to complete this torture test by dropping the magazines from a ladder. So what I have here is a step ladder. And what I'm going to do with the magazines is I'm going to go right up here, go to the top, and then drop them. You can't even quite see it all the way, but I'm going to drop them. This is just about or just over 10 feet. So I'm dropping them onto concrete. I figure this is a pretty decent, realistic test for, say, you're running and a magazine falls out of your pouch, or say you're dropping your magazines or flipping your magazines out of your gun and then they're landing on a concrete floor. So this is an approximation of normal magazine stress, maybe on the high end, and I'm going to be dropping all the magazines base plate down. And the reason for that is because I figure that'll put the most stress on the little screw that holds the two parts of a lot of magazines together. So we will see how the base plates and those screws survive, and then we're going to take them out and shoot them after we're done dropping them. So let's get started. Drop testing is apparently really not that bad. Maybe unless I brought this up to 20 or 30 feet, but I did pay for all these magazines, so I don't want to intentionally destroy them. Now for the final segment of this test. So after the drop test and after being loaded for 2 weeks, I have my VFC Mk18, has a pretty decent rate of fire. Nothing insane, but it should hopefully test if any of the springs wore out while I had these magazines loaded for 2 weeks, or if anything major happened that caused a detriment in function during the drop test. So in no particular order, we've got the 6mm Pro Shop 140 round. Definitely started chugging toward the end there, so yeah, and it looks like it retained a few BBs. So I think the 6mm Pro Shop mag, actually the spring might have worn out just a little bit. I noticed that the spring on this was wearing in even during, so this 6mm Pro Shop mag retained 7 BBs. So I definitely think the 6mm Pro Shop magazine, the spring is not very good. So after being loaded for 2 weeks, and even as I was loading and unloading during the previous testing segments, the spring basically wore out. Because as you saw there, it started chugging in the feeding toward the end. So 6mm Pro Shop has officially failed the torture test. Next up, we have the PTS EPM. And the PTS EPM fed every single round flawlessly. So the EPM passed the torture test. Next up, we have the KWA K120. Definitely a few misfeeds in the bunch there. So the KWA K120 did have a few misfeeds. So overall, I would say the spring might have broken in just a little bit too much. So KWA K120 is not so hot on the torture test. Definitely not as good as the EPM. G&P high RPS. The high RPS fed every single round until like the last 5. It had 1 or 2 miscaps. So the high RPS, I would actually say overall, also pretty much passed the torture test. Modify XTC 190. Definitely started having some misfeeds toward the end. It did feed every single round, but toward the end of the magazine, definitely had a few misfeeds. So the spring might have broken in just a little too much. The airsoft systems, which I'm gonna have to hold in, otherwise it might just fall out randomly. Well, hey, the airsoft systems It passed the torture test, just too bad it barely fits in anything. Next up, we have the PTS E-Mag. Now this magazine is already old, so unfortunately I don't know what to expect from this. Fed every single round flawlessly. So the old magazine apparently could hold up with the new tricks, because it also 100% passed the torture test. Next up, we have the E&C 160 round. I'd say about halfway through, the E&C 160 round started having some misfeeds, but it did feed every single round. Definitely had some misfeeds though at this kind of rate of fire after the spring was left compressed for a couple of weeks and after the drop test. So, you know, partial credit I'll say, but it does not seem to have fed every single round. Next up, we have the VFC 120 round. The VFC 120 round, I think, had one double feed actually, but no failures to feed. So the VFC 120 round, I'm gonna call that a pass, because again, bear in mind, this is a gearbox that's going really quick and actually wasn't designed to go this quick, so I am gonna give that one some benefit of the doubt. The spring overall doesn't seem to have worn out. Next up, we have the MAG 190 round metal midcap. A couple of misfeeds in the bunch, but overall it seems to have kept up. So, couple of misfeeds, but it did all right. Next up, we have the Elite Force 140 round midcap. Okay, so I fumbled my words a bit, so I'm going to cut there. Overall, I would say it actually kept up very well. So the Elite Force midcap, the spring's pretty good. Doesn't seem to have had any issues from the torture test. Next up, we have the VFC 120 round QRS. Kept up absolutely no issue. So the VFC QRS also passed the torture portion of the test. Okay, next up we have the SOCOM Gear Troy magazine. Started struggling definitely toward the latter half of the magazine, but it did feed every round. So definitely some misfeeds, but it fed every round. So half and half on that one. SOCOM Gear Lancer. Again, started struggling toward the second half of the magazine, actually maybe even a little earlier, so didn't quite keep up, but it did feed every round. EVIC Banff. Started skipping toward the second half of the magazine, but it did feed every round. So not quite perfect performance. G&G GR16 midcap. A couple of skips, but overall actually kept up very well. SEMA 150 round. Started skipping toward the end, but actually did decently. Hex Mag. We'll see how this does. Started skipping just a little bit toward the end at this high rate of fire, but it did feed every single round. Ares Amoeba. Definitely a few misfeeds, but it fed every single round. Mag, 130 round plastic mid-cap. Seems to have actually kept up very well. Maybe 1 or 2 misfeeds in the bunch, but overall did pretty good. Next up, we have the Garter Blue Box mid-cap. Much like we saw on the Polar Star, toward the beginning, it was chopping and double feeding, but then it smoothed out and fed every single round. So, I don't know. I just think this magazine doesn't do great at high rate of fire for the whole first half. Just doesn't seem to work. Tipman, 120 round mid-cap. Definitely a few misfeeds in the bunch, but overall seem to keep up pretty well. Next up, we have the SEMA 190 round mid-cap. I seem to have wrecked my gun. Pretty sure the piston just stripped. Good thing I'm dropping it off to have it worked on. So I actually just swapped guns. I put the same 11-1 battery into this one, but it unfortunately I just stripped the piston on my Mark 18. So we're gonna use my Krytac, which doesn't have quite as absurd a rate of fire, but this is the SEMA 190 round 416 style mid-cap. Started misfeeding toward the end, but overall it actually kept up pretty well. But yeah, toward the end it did start misfeeding. And the final magazine, I'm gonna see if this fits in my older spec Krytac. Oh, it does, okay. So actually, my old, like first generation, first run Krytac receiver, this G&P 130 round metal mag fits in. Just doesn't fit in the new one. But let's see if the mag keeps up at all. Yeah, started having some misfeeding, double feeding, and not feeding toward the end. And again, it retained several rounds. So, yeah, all told, the G&P magazine retained 5 rounds. Nope, more than that. 6, just one fell out. 7. So the G&P magazine retained the last 7 rounds, actually. And it seems like it actually jammed up worse at that narrowing point. So the spring does seem to have broken in a bit. So overall, the only magazines on this table that had what I could really call a flawless performance after the 2 weeks loaded torture test were the VFC QRS mid-cap, the Elite Force 140 round mid-cap, the old PTS E-mag, the Airsoft Systems magazine that unfortunately feeds in like nothing, the PTS EPM with the latest gen rebuild kit, and the VFC 120 round mid-cap. So those are the only ones that after 2 weeks loaded were able to keep up with a high rate of fire. Now I'm gonna do one last function check and just see, do all the mags feed on semi-auto under normal use? Now I already know what some of you are thinking. Some of you are thinking to yourselves, Eric, you just put these mags through a lot. Do they still work for normal use? Because I did just put them through a high rate of fire test after I put them through a 2-week loaded test and a drop test. But I'm sure a lot of people are saying, Eric, I don't need my mags to keep up with an 11.1 320 feet per second VFC Mk18 with an ASG 45K motor that's going so fast it strips its piston halfway through. I'm sure a lot of you are saying to yourself, will the mags work on something a little more normal, like say semi-auto on this Krytac that shoots about 380, 7.4, again an ASG motor, but on a 7.4 with a little bit of a higher FPS? Will it just keep up with that on semi-auto, maybe a full auto burst? More normal use. Let's find out. In no particular order, the hex mag. Semi-auto, no issue. Doing that just fine. Couple of full auto bursts. Again, no problem. Like 1 or 2 misfeeds right at the end, but I literally think those were just the BBs from the hop-up track bouncing up and out. So the hex mag, just fine for normal use, even after all it's been through. Even after I do unjam it, seems to be doing okay for a more normal use. KWA K120. Seems to be keeping up just fine on semi-auto, full auto. My fuse just popped. Fuck my life. We're actually gonna switch to my Krytac LMG because my CRB just decided to pop its fuse again. I still haven't replaced the motor or the MOSFET on it. I just replaced the fuse, hoping it would hold up long enough to finish this out, but it didn't. So KWA K120 kept up on semi-auto just fine. Let's try the full auto on here. Just fine, no issues. Aries Amoeba. Semi-auto is no issue. No problems at all. Fed every round. Evic Banff. Did just fine. No issues at all. Did retain 1 BB. But other than that, it fed almost every round, retained 1 BB right at the end. SOCOM Gear Troy. Seems to be feeding just fine on semi. Full auto, no problems. And this is on actually a 7.4 with the stock Krytac 30K motor. And I'm actually feeding these Elite Force 2.8s at this point. I went through a lot of 2.5s for this test, so I actually ran out. I know how this went last time. I'm gonna try, okay, this does not fit in the LMG. I'll find some way to test that. But then we have the ENC. No issues on semi. But it did not keep up on full auto, and it retained a round or 2, so hold on. Yeah, it's retaining some ammo. The ENC seems like the spring is actually properly a little worn out, so the ENC no longer functional for a more normal application. Modify XTC. Seems just fine. Modify XTC, ooh. Retained a round or 2. The Modify XTC has now taken to the habit of retaining 1 last BB, but other than that, it feeds everything. But it does retain 1 last BB right in there. G&G. Semi-auto's just fine. Fed every single round. So the G&G, still just fine after unloading after 2 weeks and then reloading. Still working for normal use. SEMA, 150 round. No issues. Couple of misfeeds, couple of failures to feed, and it did retain 1 BB in there, or at least 1. Yep, retained 1 last BB in there, popped out when I put it in the hop-up track, so it did retain 1. Mag, 130 round. Absolutely no problems, just a BB was still in there, but it wasn't retained, it was just happened to fall that way. So Mag 130 round, totally fine. Next up, Mag 190 round. No issues on semi. No issues on full. No rounds retained, fed every BB. Next up, we have the Garter Blue Box. No issues on semi. Kept up just fine on full. Did not retain any BBs, so still workable. Elite Force, 140 round. No issues on semi. Fed every round on full auto. So the Elite Force, still just fine. G&P, high RPS. Semi-auto's no issue. And no misfeeds on full, it seems like. Did it retain any BBs? It did. It retained one BB. So did not quite feed every single round. PTS EMAG. No issues on semi. No issues on full. Fed every single round. Not shocked. VFC QRS. No issues on semi. Totally kept up on full. Fed every round. PTS EPM. Totally fed on semi. Totally fed on full. Fed every single round. Lancer, the SOCOM Gear Lancer. Fed on semi. No issues on full. And it fed every single round. Airsoft Systems, which I actually don't think feeds in this gun. Yeah, no, it doesn't work. Okay, never mind. Tipman, 120. No issues on semi. Ooh. Definitely some misfeeding on full auto. Not keeping up quite well. And it did retain a round. Let's see if I can put that back in and get it out. So the Tipman actually does seem to have broken in its spring quite a bit. So the Tipman is actually not quite keeping up anymore. SEMA, 190 round. No issues on semi. Full auto worked great. Fed every single round. The SEMA 190 round is actually doing pretty well for more normal purposes. It's just that it seems like it struggles at high rate of fire. VFC 120 round. No issues on semi. Fed every round on full. Ooh, no, it did not. Did not quite feed every single round on full auto. It did retain one BB. So the QRS mag does seem to have a little bit of a different spring than that metal Stanag. And then we have the 6mm Pro Shop 140 round. Let's see how this does. Semi-auto seems to feed. Full auto definitely had some chops. And yeah, it retained how many BBs this time? Yeah, and it retained 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 BBs retained in the 6mm Pro Shop magazine. So the 6mm Pro Shop magazine, the spring is obviously totally shot. This thing is continually retaining more BBs the more I use it. It is continually feeding worse on full auto the more I use it. So I think the 6mm Pro Shop is just a junker, not a good magazine.